Yes.
Who's ready? You ready?
So I'm ready.
So ready.
Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm John Lovett.
Just vote.
That's Tommy
Hey.
Vitor.
Hello.
We are coming to you today from our brand new studio, guys.
It's very nice.
We've had a small studio in the new offices for quite a while, and the new one is now built, and it is incredible. You're listening to this,
You're gonna have
but
to
you're going to have to look at the live stream.
Shame we finished it right before we get shut down like a Turkish opposition newspaper.
Later in the pod, you'll hear from Colin Allred, a Democratic candidate running for a congressional seat in Texas that we hope to flip tomorrow. Because tomorrow is Election Day.
Or today if you're listening to this on Tuesday.
That's true, too. Erin Ryan subbed for John Lovett this past week, completing her stint as a guest host on Lovett or Leave It. 3 cheers for Erin and Guy Branum.
4 awesome episodes. Do you want to do?
What's it? Branum, right?
Branum.
Yeah. Three cheers for Erin and Guy Branum.
Guy and Aaron did an awesome job hosting Love It or Leave It while I was gone. It's a machine. It can run without me. That's the dream.
So no more Mr. Nice Guy?
What?
What does that mean?
It's a dumb joke, and you guys didn't get it, so I just let it sit.
Oh, because of Guy Branum.
Yeah. We'll cut that. We'll cut all that.
Oh my, I see. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Didn't think it was that
Yikes.
complicated.
Sorry, you were. I didn't get it.
Fucking
I thought it
yikes.
was.
Mensa over here.
Anyway, whatever we kept. Listen, here's the thing. Tommy just made a joke. I'm not even sure if it was bad enough
joke?
to leave in. The key thing to remember is we had some awesome episodes, and I'm back on Thursday with an after-election special win, lose, or draw. So check that out.
Another programming note, we will be live streaming a Vote Save America 2018 election special tomorrow night right here at Crooked headquarters. Pfeiffer will be here too, the whole crew, everyone in the greater Los Angeles area who wants to come for emotional support.
Don't put that out there.
We will all be here. We'll also be doing a wrap-up pod, all 4 of us, on Wednesday afternoon that will be out Wednesday night. What will it say? Who knows?
If you want to watch the live stream, youtube.com/crookedmedia.
If you want to watch the live stream tomorrow night, it is youtube.com/crookedmedia. Check it out.
Check it out.
Trying to get those YouTube subs for Elijah.
Wall-to-wall coverage coming to you live from
We're
the
gonna-
Crooked Election HQ.
We have a countdown clock.
It's election night in America. I don't know what they say
happening
on the
now.
other networks.
Anyway, all right. Tomorrow is Election Day. As you all know, we're out of the prediction business. We also try to stay away from too much horse race coverage. But
That's all that's left.
But that's
lot of
all that's
butts.
exactly.
Yeah, I
That is
know.
all that left. That's all that's left. So we're going to indulge a little bit of it today. I thought it would be useful to start by talking a little bit about the state of the race, in order for people to understand where we are and how we got here. The final polling averages give the Democrats a 7 to 8 point lead on the generic ballot, maybe 9. That would be one of the bigger midterm margins either party's ever had. For example, when the Republicans won by 6.8% in 2010, they picked up 63 seats. In 2006, a 7-point win gave the Democrats 31 seats. And yet, despite that, in this election, Republicans are heavily favored to keep the Senate and maybe even gain seats there. And while Democrats are heavily favored to win the House, the low end of the various projections have us picking up 20-something seats when we need 23. So it feels really close. Why is that? Who wants to take a stab?
Gerrymandering.
Yeah,
We're a divided country,
That's good.
and the House map shouldn't be so divided and difficult, but has been gerrymandered to hell. So we're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah.
That is the truth. Now, I say that not as an excuse. We need to win 23 or moral victories mean nothing, but it's important when people are assessing what this means for Trumpism, because there's a concern that if we pick up the House and Republicans hang on to the Senate or pick up seats in the Senate, it'll be like, well, mixed bag on Trumpism. The reality is the national polls, the majority of the country is not pleased with the way he's running the country. They don't like a campaign that is entirely built on racism. They want people to talk about healthcare and things they actually care about, and so just some context.
Yeah, and it is also more than just gerrymandering. It is something unique to this moment. One of the things that was fascinating, John, I saw you tweeting about this yesterday, the Nate Cohn upshot completed there many real-time polls that got fish like you on the hook. You know.
Look, maybe Tommy and I were texting back and forth about the leads changing. Maybe not.
But
maybe we're reading them aloud in the car in real time.
one thing that is striking is just how many races are polling at 1 or 2 points.
Yeah.
Like, if there is going to be a wave, it is going to be very, very wide and very, very shallow. And it will either be high enough to pick up a huge number of seats, or if it is just a little too shallow, we will come close in a ton of districts we would have needed to win. So on top of the built-in advantage Republicans have because of gerrymandering, there's also just this fact of the electorate right now. I don't know if, we won't know what it looks like till after it's done, but it's almost like these two things sort of meeting, this sort of changing country of people that want to reject Trump in the majority, plus the Trump base coming out and being energized and kind of meeting in the middle and creating weather all across the country in this specific kind of transitional period between Trump's older, whiter base and the coalition we've been waiting to show up since Barack Obama left us here alone.
Just to give you an idea of this house map.
All alone.
Just
What? I was listening to what he was saying.
I thought you were.
Just to give you an idea of this house map here, you can easily count about 16 to 17 pickups for Democrats. But then, like you were saying, Lovett, to get from 17 to 23, you have a ton of races in Republican territory. There are almost no races being fought on Democratic territory. And most of these races are like 1 to 2 point races. A lot of these places, some places voted for Clinton that have Republicans in them. We talked about those districts, but those are probably some of the easiest ones to go.
Mm-hmm.
Most of this election is being fought in Republican districts that went for Trump. Now, some of them might have gone for Obama in 2012, but some of them haven't sent a Democratic member to Congress for years, for a decade.
Like Alaska.
Like Alaska. But, like, for example, one of the races we've been looking at is Abigail Spanberger in the Virginia 7th, running against Dave Bratt. And she's a great candidate. It's been very competitive, very close. I was looking the other day because I'm like, I wonder when's the last time a Democrat went to Congress here? Well, not for a very long time, but also Ralph Northam, when he went on to a 9-point victory in Virginia in just 2017, lost that district by 4 points. Mm-hmm. And yet Spanberger is still competitive in that. So just so people have an idea of what an uphill climb this is. And even if Democrats eke out a majority by 23, 24, 25 seats, it is an enormous accomplishment because it means that they won seats in deep red Republican territory.
Yes. Also a good reminder, by the way, that the Northam polls were off
By a lot.
by a few points. Yeah. And because all of these races are are showing up, and because all of these races are so tight, the polling error feels almost more important as we head into tomorrow than normal.
Yeah, and I will say too, the last time the Democrats had a wave election in the House was 2006. And the environment was different then, right? It was George Bush's second term. His approval rating was around 30-something%. The Iraq War had been raging for a couple years. Katrina had just happened. Every day there were stories about Republican corruption. So even that was a better environment.
It's a slog.
It's a slog.
It's a slog. It's also, Peter Hamby wrote a piece about how pundits don't know anything, and it was a good piece. This is a unique election. It's the only time Donald Trump has been president during a midterm election. And there's all these contradictory indicators. There's an economy that's doing well. There is a president who is unpopular, but not as unpopular as someone like George W. Bush. There is a lot of dissatisfaction with the direction of the country, yet the party in power is viewed as being better on the economy than the party trying to defeat them. So there's a lot of confusing signs out there. If you were to just come into this race without all the context of how polarizing and terrible Donald Trump is, you'd be saying, wow, it seems impossible for Democrats to win this election. Look at all the basic political science 101 stuff that's going up against them, not just gerrymandering, but the concentration of Democrats in the cities, the way the economy is going, and so much else.
Well, let's talk about the Senate map, which is even tougher. Why is the Senate map so tricky for Democrats?
I mean, it's just a bad year.
Yeah,
It's just the worst year in a century. We are competing for
Bad
seats
states.
in. I mean, we're talking about Montana. We're talking about Missouri. We're talking about North Dakota. We're talking about West
Texas.
Virginia. We're talking about Texas. We are trying to keep seats in the purpley red states like Arizona or the purpley blue states like Nevada. So it's just a combination of the inherent disadvantages Democrats now have in the Senate, combined with the fact that these are just the 32 that happen to be up, and they happen to be in parts of the country where we struggle.
It is very important, I think, that the predictions are all over the place in the Senate, but every single Senate seat matters, and it matters for the long game too, which we haven't talked about, because in 2020, it looks like Colorado is a target for us with Cory Gardner, and Maine is a target because of Susan Collins. Those are states that have been trending Democratic over the last couple of years. Iowa and North Carolina, Joni Ernst and Tom Tillis are both also maybe competitive for us. And then Doug Jones is going to be up again in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
So if we end up with a 50-50 tie in the Senate after tonight, for example, and Mike Pence is the tiebreaker and Republicans keep it, in 2020, because we still got 50, if we pick off Colorado or we pick off Maine, we have a Democratic president, suddenly we have a majority in the Senate and can confirm Supreme Court justices. So it's actually a huge deal. If we lose the Senate by 1, by 2, or by 3, it's actually a big difference.
Right. Yeah. In the next 2 years, it's a digital thing, win or lose. But in the next 4 or 6 years, we are trying to slowly claw our way back to a majority.
So as Tommy mentioned, because Dems are favored to win the House and Republicans are favored to win the Senate, we're starting to see headlines like this one from the Wall Street Journal. A test of Trump midterms could result in a mixed verdict. Would this scenario be a mixed verdict on Trump? And how much does it really matter if that is the post-election analysis?
No, it would not be a mixed verdict. If you lose the House, it's a big defeat of Trump. If you lose the House with a wildly gerrymandered House map, it's a rebuke of Trump. If we pick up any governor seats, it's a rebuke of Trump. Like, Trumpism is on the ballot.
Yeah.
He declared it to be on the ballot. Just because the Senate races are all bright red states doesn't mean that somehow he is set up to win in the Senate.
Yeah.
They have a huge structural advantage in the Senate. Places like Missouri and Texas and all the states we've already mentioned are tough races for Democrats. Period.
I mean, it's part of the reason why horse race coverage is so lacking, because the thing that doesn't get enough tension are structural differences, the map, right? Like Missouri, Montana, West Virginia. Donald Trump won West Virginia by 42 points. The fact that Joe Manchin is hanging on as a Democrat is crazy.
This is what frustrates me about this whole conversation, not our conversation, like the whole conversation about whether is this a rebuke of Trumpism or not. In 2010, when Barack Obama, we held on to the Senate and we lost the House, it was seen as a huge rebuke of Obama.
Huge rebuke.
Shellacking. And rightly so. And rightly so. But the press covers voter suppression and gerrymandering, which is essentially voter suppression in some ways, as if it's just sort of a built-in feature of American democracy and not a long-term effort to completely pervert the way our democracy works. And that drives me a little bit crazy. Like, voter suppression tactics in Georgia should be a much bigger story than a fucking caravan that is still 800 miles away and that we've been talking about for weeks. But that is not how these things are covered.
Yeah.
Well, and the Senate has a different problem, which is less about gerrymandering than just
Not at all about gerrymandering, just hard states.
Just geographic problems too.
Well, and the fact that across the country, that in races that are going to be really close, their efforts to suppress the vote are enough to swing an election.
Right. And I say this less for influencing the horse race coverage, which they're going to do what they do, but for all of you listening, right? Like, if we wake up on Wednesday and we win the House and we come short in the Senate, no one should feel like Democrats did poorly or what happened to this blue wave. Like, you got to know how hard these states are, and the reason these states are hard is because we are seeing a real realignment between the two parties right now that is based on education among white people. And so college-educated whites are moving in droves towards Democrats. Non-college educated whites, we have never been doing worse with them. It is true, it is possible that in this election, we may make up a lot of ground among non-college whites in the Midwest, the very place that lost Hillary the election. We are seeing Democrats do very well, especially in governor's races in Ohio, in Wisconsin, in Michigan.
Yeah.
Gretchen Whitmer's on her way to hopefully a pretty big win.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. And so, we could make up a lot of ground in these Midwestern states that have in Pennsylvania, that have traditionally gone to Democrats. But the Senate, most of the Senate map is not in this. I mean, like, if you had told us a year ago, we'd be sitting here and Sherrod Brown would be on his way to victory and Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin would be on her way to victory, people would say, that's crazy. Trump won those states.
Or that I would even know who was running in Texas.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, the governor there, like, they're all doing fantastic in these states that you lost. But Missouri,
Tough.
Montana,
Tough.
Indiana, I mean, these are really tough states.
Also,
North Dakota.
Also, the narrative that the political press used to describe the outcome of the election doesn't really matter at all. If there's a bunch
Once
of
we
stories,
got the gavel in the house.
yes,
that's what I was,
that's
by
about
one
to say.
seat, by one seat.
Look, here's the thing: if there are a bunch of stories on Tuesday or on Wednesday or Thursday, by the way, want to once again reiterate, we may wake up on Wednesday having won fucking nothing, wishing we could go back in time and appreciate how lucky we would have been to have a narrative called
Wake up
split
and we're
voting.
like, what? Mike Levin's the only one going to Congress?
Yeah, we got it's Minority Leader Mike Levin. No,
dark humor, guys.
But what I was going to say is the narrative doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No, it does. It matters a lot. It matters a lot. When Dave Bratt beat Eric Cantor, the narrative coming out of that was that it was all about immigration. And that scuttled the hopes for immigration reform for a long time. And people that have dug deep into what actually happened in that race, was the Virginia congressional race primary, have figured out after the fact that it was really not about immigration. But like these things can set narratives. And if they can give Republicans the courage or not to say Trumpism is bullshit, or at least that Trumpism won't work for me.
I think that's a good point.
Winning the House means that we have power for the next 2 years. And there's nothing that a DC press corps can say about what the verdict meant to change the fact that we will have control of these committees, that we will have the speakership, that we will have power and a seat at the table. That's all that I'm saying.
And I'm not arguing about that, but I'm saying that the narrative coming out of these elections really does matter. And I think, like, this is why, pre-2016 when we were wildly wrong, but everyone wanted not just to beat Trump, but to rebuke Trumpism, because you had the 2012 election and the after-action report about being more inclusive and reaching out to Latinos and African Americans, and that was fully rebuked by the Trump win, and we've seen the Republican Party go full MAGA right-wing crazy.
Well, let's talk about that. I want to move on to the closing arguments both parties have been making. So for the last month or so, Trump has been churning out even more explicitly racist and xenophobic lies, even more than usual. As summarized by the Washington Post in their piece on Sunday night, quote, Trump is claiming that Democrats want to erase the nation's borders and provide sanctuary to drug dealers, human traffickers, and MS-13 killers, unleashing a wave of violent crime that endangers families everywhere. Good for the Washington Post for saying it like it is. And yet, there's a Politico story that also went online last night that says this, quote, Republicans focused on the House are profoundly worried that Trump's obsession with all things immigration will exacerbate their losses. The story even has Paul Ryan calling up Donald Trump on Sunday, begging him to talk up the economy instead of immigration. Do we believe that Trump is the only Republican who's wanted to focus on xenophobia?
You think that call happened?
I don't give a shit. Paul Ryan giving interviews on Face the Nation decrying the fact that we can't have a strategically valuable, inclusive, inspirational politics while his super PAC runs some of the most racist fucking ads this cycle all across the country tells you everything you need to know. What is, to me, Tommy, the narrative that is going to be the most important thing to focus on after this election is not what does it mean if Democrats win the House or don't win the House. Right now, you have conservative pundits trying to say that this is an election about deregulation and lower taxes, and that's what they're campaigning on, right? If they lose the House, you're going to see so if Republicans win the House, they're going to say they won because of low taxes and they won because of deregulation. If they lose the House, they're going to say it's because the intellectuals are going to say it's because Trumpism doesn't work, right?
That's right.
And they will do the exact opposite depending on the outcome. And to me, that is the most important thing. And I think we have to all be very clear. If Republicans don't do well, we need to make it our story that in an attempt to cover up for their unpopular policies, they tried to use immigration, but they can't deny that what happened in this campaign was about both. That to me is our big task, to make it both about race baiting and about their unpopular policies.
Yeah, I think that the challenge on the race baiting piece is that you have so many media outlets, and we've talked about this before, who won't call overt racism for what it is.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Des Moines Register, not like some big mainstream news outlet, referred to Steve King, an avowed white nationalist, a white supremacist, as blunt-talking conservative politician.
Usually they say firebrand.
Yeah, and then what was the other thing they said about him? He has a headline of off-color comments and strong anti-immigration views. I mean, that is whitewashing, pun not intended, like guy who just went to Austria to meet with a party started by a former SS officer, like a Nazi, right? I mean, like, this is a bad human being, but we won't call these people for what they are.
It's like saying Stringer Bell was a no-nonsense boss.
So anyway, these are the hobby horses that I have all I have left to complain about in these closing days of an election.
It is important to recognize that it is not just Trump who has gone full xenophobe in the Republican Party. They have all gone along with him. It's not even like we always complain about Paul Ryan being silent about it. It's not like they were silent about it while it happened. They used this in their own campaigns. Look at Ron DeSantis' campaign that he ran in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Brian fucking Kemp in Georgia, who is in the running for the worst villain of the cycle, for sure.
Which is tough category.
I realize that at this point, Brian Kemp has engaged in so much voter suppression that when you see a story about him in voter suppression, you're like, whatever. It's like it's Tuesday,
Yep.
But what he did over the weekend,
nuts.
that was a new fucking low. So in 2016, Kemp was one of the only Secretary of States in the country to refuse help from the Department of Homeland Security to shore up their election systems because they said there are huge vulnerabilities in Georgia's election system that are vulnerable to cyber attacks. And so a constituent in Georgia wrote an email to someone at the Voter Protection Hotline saying there are vulnerabilities in the Secretary of State's website that could be exposed by hackers. And then Kemp said that person who wrote about the vulnerabilities was a Democrat trying to hack the system, and said that the Democrats were under FBI investigation for trying to hack the fucking Georgia election system. It is fucking stunning.
Well, and in case you hear that and think that's ludicrous, that's laughably stupid. I mean, Stacey Abrams was doing a round of Sunday shows this weekend and was asked this question about this allegation from Brian Kemp by very serious journalists like Jake Tapper. And that sucks for her, that her closing message is colored by this nonsense made-up allegation.
It is. I mean, that election, by the way, God, I hope Stacey Abrams wins. But he has done everything possible to steal that election.
Well,
and I say steal not as an exaggeration.
Yes, it's and this again comes down to the language we use. Tom Skoka wrote a great piece.
Great piece.
You read it, right? It's for some place called Daily, which
it was floating around last week. I don't know, and it was.
I just saw it this
it's
weekend.
Sort of been bubbling up, yeah.
But basically about that, because a lot of our political conversation is about how bad will Trump get, we're not doing a good enough job of accepting and describing how bad things are right now. And this is a great example. We have already seen with the Voting Rights Act being restricted by a conservative Supreme Court, an incredible amount of voter suppression, of anti-democratic practices. What Brian Kemp is doing is stealing an election. And if he wins by a tiny majority, it will be an illegitimate election. But our politics so presumes the respectability of both parties it is, and not just in not using the word lie, not just in the kind of surfacey way, but deep. It is a deep core philosophy of our political system that both parties are respectable and competing on a level playing field in a battle of ideas. And when that does not happen, which is what's happening in Georgia, if Stacey Abrams loses by a tiny amount, or if it goes to a runoff because you need to get 50 and she almost gets to 50, and she loses, it will not be legitimate. But our politics doesn't have an ability to allow that information to inform our politics. The political press will call him the winner and describe his strategy as having been effective.
Right. I was going to say, as you say, our politics, what you really mean is our media.
Our media. Well, yes.
Yes,
of course.
It is. That's what it is.
But even Democrats don't. Look, yes, of course.
Well, no, Democrats know.
Well,
we're all saying
we know how to say it. We know how to say it, but I don't know that we know how to truly live in a system in which Georgia will have an illegitimate governor who does not belong there and does not deserve the power that he has. I don't know how to handle it.
Say that it's true.
I know. Well, I don't know what you do beyond that.
Just a note shy of that. I mean, Brian Kemp, again, terrible person, tweeting out racist photos of the new Black Panther Party yesterday just to play the racist greatest hits. But that race, someone has to get 50% or else it goes to a runoff. So I know we all want to take a deep breath on Wednesday and like reassess our lives and call some old friends and shit. But if that gets to a runoff, we all need to go all in on making sure Stacey Abrams has the resources.
And
And it really might. It really might.
Instead of asking the question like, what does it mean for our politics if Trump's strategy and the Republican strategy of race baiting and xenophobia works, or if it doesn't? We don't know, right? But whether it works or not, what will remain true after Tuesday is that there is a sizable part of the population, a Republican base, that got excited about it. Because whether it's enough to get them over the edge or not, there has clearly been movement consolidating the Republican base over the last month.
Yeah.
And that is partly a result of Donald Trump race baiting and and being full xenophobe on immigration, and him having the largest propaganda network in the world on his side, Fox News, just churning that shit out, and all the other
Tough
right-wing
hit on
outlets.
China Daily, but sure.
and all the other right-wing outlets, and perhaps an unwitting propaganda machine, Facebook, that has been spreading all of these conspiracies too.
Sorry. There will be a bunch of wars for the spin out of this, and I know we've sort of debated the relevance of them. I just want to note one thing, which is the new NBC Marist poll of Florida Senate race. They asked voters whether they would prefer a candidate who opposed Brett Kavanaugh to a candidate who supported him. In the new NBC Marist poll of Florida Senate, the likely voters say they prefer a candidate who opposed Brett Kavanaugh to a candidate who supported him. That is the fifth state where the NBC poll has shown this, including Nevada and Arizona. So this is another example of where I think the spin coming out of this is very important, because you're going to have the Hugh Hewitts of the world, as you call them, the intellectual Zambonis that sweep up after Trump, who say that Democrats' efforts to make sure a woman making a credible allegation of sexual assault be heard was somehow bad politics, and thus bad, right? Because that's the Trump zero-sum view of the world. You win, you lose, you're right, you're wrong. And we need to make sure that people understand that no.
And you know what, Tommy?
That had to be heard.
That's the Trump view of the world, but that has been the view of the world from the political media, the DC political media, for as long as we've all been in politics. And it's like, if Democrats win, they're the biggest geniuses ever known to man. Everything they did was right. They ran a perfect campaign, and that's not going to be true.
I just want everyone listening. You may not be able to hear it, but I promise I'm knocking on wood every time anyone says the words Democrats win.
Axelrod always used to say this. It's like, we are not as smart as people say we are when we win, and we're not as dumb as people say we are when we lose. And that's going to be because it's all they can handle is winning or losing, and they don't, and everything else gets blinded.
And that goes to this question of the narrative after, because winning the House or losing the House, it's a yes or no proposition, but the actual interplay of Republicans, business politics around tax cuts and regulation, and their racial politics around immigration, these things are going to be with us for a while. And regardless of whether or not we can say after the fact that immigration worked for Trump or didn't work for Trump, what we know right now is immigration is working better for them than their actual agenda. That even if this isn't enough to get them the victories that they need, we know that running away, that they don't feel like they have a platform they can run on. And Paul Ryan, I'm going to be obsessed with Paul Ryan saying this to fucking Face the Nation forever, but him saying like, how do we make inclusive, inspirational politics more strategic? It's actually a really good question. It's a really, really good question. How do we get Republicans to decide that there's a different kind of politics, whether it's anti-healthcare, deregulation, pro-tax cut for the rich, or using race baiting to try to win despite the unpopularity of the agenda? I don't know how you get them to moderate on policy. I don't know how you get them to deracialize in order to win. But
beat them.
The only answer is to beat them. That's all.
There will always be an electoral wipeout. Is the only thing.
The only thing that can get the reckoning that we need to get the answer to Paul Ryan's question is to kick Paul Ryan out of politics.
And even that might not be enough. How many times did we all say, because our boss said, Obama said, it will break the fever if we beat them? And in 2012 especially, he thought, if I win 2012, if I win this re-election, it will break the fever in the Republican Party and they will stop some of the shit they're doing. Because then it was Benghazi, right?
Right.
And it only got worse.
There was always a Benghazi. There will always be a caravan.
Because they had an
excuse.
excuse.
Of that changing. I just think we have to win, and we need to win, and then we need to change some of the structural things that have made it impossible to win in some places since 2010.
Very true.
2010 was a decade-long disaster.
Right.
because of the census here, and we are hopefully going to be able to fix that.
They could always point to the fact that, Barack Obama won, but Mitt Romney had flaws. Barack Obama's a once-in-a-generation talent. They could point to the fact that they were doing well in the House and Senate to avoid that reckoning. If they had lost in 2016, I believe that reckoning would have come. They just needed to be laid low, and we have not since Barack Obama won in 2012, and really since Democrats won the Congress in 2006, there has not been a decisive blow to republicanism in politics. That's 12 years ago.
The only one was from Donald Trump to the establishment.
Right.
That was the only decisive
And
blow.
they were just like, well,
Whereas
we'll just...
the establishment is still sitting around being like, no, our tax cuts they're very popular, and
He's
so
really
is
running as us.
so is our position on healthcare, which is why we're fucking lying about it this whole election.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing? We're in a slightly dark place. I know I certainly am, but I want to say thank you.
I'm in an anxious place.
I'm in a very anxious place. I will never take anything for granted ever again. But I just want to say thank you to the Pod Save America listeners, because the people who listen to this show did not sit on their ass and just read tweets. Some couple quick stats. You guys raised $1.34 million for 20 targeted candidates that we started talking about. You raised another $785,000 for 11 targeted candidates. Back in the day, you guys raised like $400,000 for the Crooked 8 districts. That is on top of 207,000 people pledging to vote on Vote Save America. 20,000 volunteer shifts were filled through Vote Save America. Nearly 500,000 people use the Vote Save America voter guide. So, you guys, every time I went canvassing, there were 5 Pod Save America t-shirts. There were people, every campaign I met with, when we went to Beto's office, half the people there had gotten staffed up via Pod Save America somehow, we're listeners. So you guys were out in force.
Yeah, no, it's been incredibly inspiring. I mean, that brings us to Democrats. We should be self-reflective before we know the verdict.
That's right.
Yes.
Are the Democrats closing well? Do we think they made any big mistakes along the way? Harder to do before we know the verdict, huh?
I would just say all the judges are giving him 10s. Just 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, landing every triple axel.
I will say, Democrats have not figured out how to talk about immigration.
Yeah, it's been a long term.
There are some that have. I think that Beto's been, we'll see if he wins or not, but I think I hear him talk about it and I feel like he sounds honest and candid and understands that, we need to have a border in this country. We need to have immigration laws and policies. But I think most Democrats have run scared, and when Republicans sense that, when the media senses it, it becomes a meta issue, which is why we're talking about the caravan still.
I agree with that. I am very proud of the party for honing in on healthcare and particularly pre-existing conditions, and especially the media narrative was not there for them. The media narrative kept pushing, and when you're in a race like that and all you see on the news is immigration, there is a real fear of maybe we have the wrong strategy, maybe we shouldn't be talking about healthcare all the time, maybe we got to go talk about this, maybe we got to move this way, that way. And for so many campaigns all around the country to think to themselves, okay, here's our plan. We're going to talk about healthcare. We're going to talk about things that matter. And there's also a larger message too that some of the best candidates I think have hit: Gillum, Abrams, Beto, some of these House members, which is, if you don't like this division and this fear, vote for us, because the only way to rebuke this kind of politics is to vote for balance in Washington, which I also think was a really smart message besides just the healthcare thing.
Yeah.
So look, I'm sure there's Democrats made plenty of mistakes along the way all over the places, but I to be perfectly honest, if we come up short on Wednesday, I do not think it will because any Democrat the Democrats as a whole made some big, huge mistakes,
Sweeping
except like you said,
no.
maybe not figuring out how to talk about immigration, but I think the healthcare message was strong, powerful. We know it matters to people. That's what voters are telling people in polls. That's what voters are telling people in person. The people we've talked to have said that.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that too. So what happens if we wake up on Wednesday and we haven't won the House? What's the lesson there? What can you take away beyond just the fact that we have this uphill climb? Because that uphill climb isn't going anywhere, right? And we need to do better. And we should want to do as well as possible, even if we do win the House. And to me, what I see around healthcare is the model for how we need to widen out our approach to other policy areas as well. That on healthcare, what you have seen in the last 2 years is the Democratic Party shift to the left, and not haphazardly, but toward a simple idea of universal coverage through access to something like Medicare, right? That is now a pretty well established consensus view. It runs from people who have proposed, like Chris Murphy, a bill to make sure everyone has access to something like Medicare, all the way to Bernie Sanders and others who have been advocating for Medicare for all. I think that's really exciting. And what I want to see after is that kind of approach to other areas, whether it's taxes or
green
jobs guarantee, energy, simple, elegant, universal, because
a pro-democracy agenda, like Tommy was saying, that includes, stop redistricting and ending voter suppression.
Not just ending voter suppression, but
automatic registration,
weekend voting,
and the ability for everyone to vote no matter what. That shifting the burden of proof back onto the government and not onto people to prove that they have the right to vote. The healthcare, because the unity on the policy of healthcare is what allowed for the unity on the politics of healthcare. The fact we were able to keep Joe Manchin in line, Joe Manchin who voted for Kavanaugh, right? We were able to keep this caucus together because we weren't just adhering to a white paper around healthcare. We had established that Democrats were better on this issue, and that gave Democrats everywhere from the most liberal places to the most conservative places the confidence to stand firm on the issue. And I think we need to look at that healthcare lesson and apply it across the board.
And look, the party and everyone in the party was very unified around giving just about every candidate a lot of running room on this issue. There are a lot of candidates who said, we're not for Medicare for all, we're here defending pre-existing conditions. And then there are candidates who were for Medicare for all in blue states and in red states too. I mean, some of these people in California that are running in these Republican Orange County districts came out for Medicare for all too, right? But whatever you decided, there was not a lot of infighting in the party about, oh, you're not with us on this, you're with this. The people who believe in Medicare for all are pushing hard as they should, as we have been. But if the people who aren't, as we're running a race against Republicans, have been okay with saying, okay, you go defend pre-existing conditions in your very tough race.
And so win, lose, or draw, the takeaway from that, there's going to be, if things don't go as well as we want, there are going to be people who say, oh, Democrats need to run to the center, Democrats need to run to the middle. And what I see is Democrats need to do more around other issues to give people the same level of confidence in this party that they have. The fact that we are moved to the left while the country has united behind Democrats on healthcare, while we might have the ability to win this election on healthcare, is going to tell you something really, really important no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Small ball thing. I just hope Democrats, well, you know what? Fuck it. I was going to talk about tactics. I don't want to. Skip it. Edit.
All right, let's end with talking about what we are watching for on Tuesday night. What are the races we are most excited about? What are we going to be looking for? What do you guys think?
Were the emotions invested?
We could do both, yeah.
Emotions are invested in Texas, Georgia, Andrew Gillum's race in Florida.
Yeah.
Those are things
Those
I'm
are the top
watching
three for me,
very,
too.
very closely. Lucy
Amendment
McBath.
4. Amendment 4 in Florida, I think,
Amendment 4 is a
that's
huge
a
deal.
60% threshold, and that's going to tell us a lot.
Amendment 5 is a big deal. It's a supermajority for tax increases, so that could
In Florida.
bottle up the next person. Florida's that's a bad one. Other candidates? Really excited about?
I mean, Gillum, Abrams, and Beto to me are the top three.
Because
And
they
look,
tell a story that's bigger than just those candidates in those states. It's about politics in general, I think.
yes, and when you look at those three candidates who are, a diverse three candidates, they also have a lot in common, right?
Yeah.
Which they are a new generation of Democrats who are they are talking big, right?
Yeah.
Their message is big. It feels like a message for the entire country, and that's because they are three progressive Democrats running in very red states.
Unabashedly so.
And when we don't know if all of them will, Beto's a long shot, though he's closing. We love him. Stacey Abrams, the first black woman to be governor of Georgia, that is an extremly tough race, and she
Monumental
is so close.
thing.
But that's tough too. And Gillum, poll show is slightly ahead, right? Like, I think I'd probably be most crushed if Gillum loses because he's probably the most likely to win, right? That's why I'd be the most crushed.
Yep.
Beto and Abrams have a tougher slog, Beto
Yeah.
especially. But those three candidates, whether they win or lose, should point the way to Democrats they should be the model for other Democrats running for office, I think.
Right, and it's funny too because of course the margin doesn't matter as much as the outcome, but the margin will tell you if it was effective or not.
That's
right?
true too.
And so there's going to be whatever happens. The conversation is based entirely around this whether or not someone crossed a 50-50 threshold. But what matters, what we can learn the most from, is what's effective in a subtler way by looking at margins, by looking at what was effective and what wasn't. So, That's all. That's all I have to say about that.
Races to watch early when the East Coast closes to give us hints about whether the Democrats will have a good night.
Race to the medical marijuana store. No, I'm just kidding.
Medical.
Indiana, Kentucky, Florida will be pretty early, right?
And so, and a note on those, like, Indiana's a tough state.
Yep.
So Indiana comes out, the polls close there early. If Joe Donnelly's having a tough time, it is not the end of the world. So just letting everyone know that. See, I know. Amy McGrath in Kentucky. Kentucky's the other one that closes super
very
early.
tough race.
That is a very tough race too. She's in the hunt. It's very close, but it could go either way. Other ones to watch early. Antonio Delgado in the New York 19th.
Mm-hmm.
If he wins, that is a very good sign for Democrats taking
That is
the
a
House.
big middle finger to Paul Ryan.
Right. Jared Golden in Maine in the 2nd District. He is in a very tight race. If he does well, that's a good sign. Tom Malinowski worked for the Obama administration in the New Jersey 7th.
In Jersey.
And then Spanberger in Virginia 7th. I would watch all of those races early, and if Democrats do well in a bunch of those races, it is a very good sign. What are you going to be doing, Lovett?
I'm going to be in a vampire's coffin, sensory deprivation tank, and I would like every once in a while for you to lift the lid and hand me little updates on like
Pour in
Post-its
some
or
water.
something.
I liked your tweet about you want to just spend the next however many hours in a room without any news coverage, and someone just hands you an envelope.
That's
with
all I want.
Yeah, I want to be in like
I would never have that. I would never be able to have that discipline.
I want to be in like an Old Boy room, the movie Old Boy, where they locked somebody in a room for 30 years. I just want to do it for 2 days without the gross stuff in that movie.
There's a movie about locking a dude in a room for 30 years.
There is.
Is it terrible?
It's terrible. People listening to this who know about Old Boy are like, yeah, you don't want that. But I just want it for 2 days without any of the things around it.
There's also some favorites, too, that I'll be watching for. Abby Finkenauer in Iowa, who we know. Chrissy Houlihan, who was on the show in Pennsylvania. Katie Porter
People
is a
will be
fantastic...
so good at the job.
Katie Porter, Katie Hill, J.D. Schulten in Iowa. Getting a close race with Steve King, perhaps.
Pennsylvania,
Aftab.
watching Pennsylvania is going to be, I think, emotionally important just because we gotta remind ourselves that we know how to win in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah. Aftab Perville in Ohio, Lauren Underwood in Illinois, Lucy McBath in Georgia.
Lauren Baer in Florida. There's a lot of names that I will not list off.
Yeah.
But one of the best parts of the job is getting to actually speak to these people face to face and realizing how impressive the slate of Democrats is.
Any Democrats you hope lose?
Well, wait. No, there are none because I don't care how bad of a candidate you are. We need every Democrat elected possible right now.
Agree to disagree.
This is a national. It is a national emergency. When we go back to having regular Republicans that beat us, we can talk about that.
True.
Final question: what's making us nervous, and what's making us hopeful in this final day? Let's start with nervous, and then we'll end on a high note for everyone.
I think genetics, everything. Emotion.
I am nervous that the caravan stuff has gotten the level of coverage that it's gotten, that we have learned nothing from 2016, that Donald Trump has found yet another issue that he can harp on, that he can get the press coverage he wants around, and that we will look back on it as having swamped the political coverage in a way that pushed out things like healthcare and tax cuts and all the rest. That makes me very, very nervous.
Yeah.
I go back to sort of structural realities. I worry about, when the results started coming in 2016, there was a surge of Trump voters in a lot of ex-urban, far-flung suburban counties that we hadn't seen before, that no one expected. And I wonder, when you look at all the polls now, and it says that, Trump's consolidated the base and Republicans are almost as excited as Democrats to turn out. It's not only an election where, Republicans might stay home. It's an election where Republicans are going to turn out. And the only question is, does our turnout beat their turnout? And also, if this was a presidential year, it would be different. Midterms, traditionally, Republicans have better turnout in midterms.
Yeah.
For us to win this midterm again, we have to change the electorate by bringing in new voters who have not voted in a long time. And that's going to heavily depend on young people turning out, Latinos turning out, and suburban women who've been crushing it.
Yeah, I worry about the zero-sum nature of politics, where winning and losing is everything, coupled with the structural challenges we face going into this year, with how hard it is to win the House or do all the things we want to do, plus the fact that a 6-point margin or a 7-point margin is all the difference in the world. And there's all these young people who are getting involved in politics for the first time. There's all these new voters who are turning out. And I want those people to feel like their participation really did matter, because it did.
Yep.
And just because, there was a smaller turnout than we needed doesn't mean that we were fully rebuked as a party or ideas were rebuked. We have to keep fighting. We have to wake up on Wednesday morning, unfortunately, and do it again.
Yeah.
We got to run it back.
What's making us hopeful?
Great candidates fighting their asses off. I mean, truly, this slate of candidates is unbelievable.
I was going to say the same thing. I have never seen a field of candidates so inspiring than I have in 2018. And that goes from the very top races in the Senate to people running for state legislature that we've met.
Yeah.
I mean, and, kudos to Run for Something and to all the groups that have been helping recruit these candidates.
Indivisible, Swing, Leftable, those people did amazing work.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen a slate of candidates. I'm so proud to be a Democrat because of the candidates we're running.
Me too.
And that makes me hopeful. And the energy. We were all canvassing yesterday. Lovett, you were with Katie Hill. We were with Harley Ruda. And it's just the passion and the energy. And we met someone in who was canvassing for Harley Ruda who was like, oh yeah, I was just canvassing for Katie Porter, and I decided to do that in the morning and then drive all the way up to the other county and do this in the afternoon.
Yeah, she did the LA ski and surf thing, but for canvassing.
Right. It is, it's funny. It's the enthusiasm and the energy is both, it is what makes me hopeful. It is also
nervous.
And nervous.
Yeah.
Well,
I hear you.
because we have done more in a midterm than we ever have before. I think there's a lot of people participating in a midterm and paying attention to a midterm in a way they haven't before, and that's really exciting. And I see all that energy and I see that all enthusiasm, and I think, God, I hope you
it's
feel.
enough.
I hope it's enough. I hope it's enough, because the thing that makes me most nervous is waking up the next day and all these people feeling, but we did everything we could,
Exactly.
and it wasn't enough.
And I do think we did everything we could. I think every person who has participated in this election, many of them who've never participated in an election before, have worked their asses off, and they have believed.
Yeah. No, it's no, but I'm glad we're talking about this today. I just, what's going to happen tomorrow is, this has been a really
shit show.
It's a shit show, and it's been a really, really long 2 years, and we need a fucking win.
Yeah.
We need it, and we've talked about just how Herculean the task is. We've talked about just how important it is, not just because winning the House means we can stop what Trump does, but the power that comes along with it. But more than that, it's a moral victory and a psychological victory that I think a lot of people listening to this feel like they need. And I know that going into Tuesday, you feel like you need it. And it's so hard to say this now before it happens. But because it really is 50-50, we need to go into this with eyes open and knowing that we have done everything we can. It truly may not be enough. But if it is, it will be because we all did our part. And if it isn't, it will be because it turns out that things were even worse and even harder and further gone than we realized. And it just means we'll have to do that much more. And that's all there is to it.
And I'm hopeful because I have sensed a slight shift in the mindset of Democratic activists and organizers. And that is, it is not just about, and the media would say otherwise, but this has not just been about, we must stop Trump.
No.
This is, and because of candidates like Beto O'Rourke and Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum and a lot of these congressional candidates all over the country, a lot of these gubernatorial candidates who are talking about a vision for the country that is bigger than Donald Trump, a type of politics that is better than what Donald Trump has given us. People are voting for something. They are knocking on doors and inspired and out there because they believe in something, not because they just want to stop Trump. And I think that energy is more powerful than the negative energy just to stop something bad from happening. And that makes me hopeful. Okay. Well, we will talk to you all tomorrow evening, Tuesday evening, here in the studio.
If you need me, I'm going to go throw my laptop into a fucking volcano and hide from the news.
I'll be refreshing Twitter every 5 seconds. From now until the first results come in, I feel like I'm back on a campaign, even though we're not in campaigns.
I know.
All you do is you just text you hearing anything? You hear anything?
I know.
What do you know? What do you know? Any
Everyone
numbers?
I've-
You got any numbers for me?
It's so
Everyone
funny.
I've ever worked with in politics is now in a group text.
There
with me.
really is nothing left to say. We have
Nothing.
spent
Nothing.
we have spent 2 years trying to convince people to go to the Olive Garden instead of a restaurant where they poison you, don't pay their staff, and the owner is a racist. And the Olive Garden isn't perfect, all right? And you wish it was more consistent, but you know what? When you're there, your family.
Awesome.
End it there.
The Olive Garden election. All right. When we come back, we will have our interview with Texas congressional candidate Colin Allred. Outro.
Oh, yeah.
Outro.